Well, it's kind of like, they don't do this and they don't do that and they don't let you dance so after a while you started feeling like, God, we're the biggest fucking like nerds or some, geeks. And so it's kind of hard not to feel like that, but at the same time, we're doing things the way we want to do them. We're fulfilling the things we, think are important, and we just keep doing them.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded, insane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the Creative Asylum. As always, I'm your host, Daniel House. Today's episode is the first in a series of conversations with post-punk bass players who are legendary in my opinion. Today I talk with Joe Lally. There's a good chance you know him as the bass player for the band Fugazi, a band that was together between the years 1987 and 2002. Additionally, Joe's put out several solo records and also played on a one-off project with John Frusciante called Ataxia. The project sounds nothing like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, trust me. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother to mention it. Joe and drummer Brendan Canty, the same drummer that he was in with Fugazi, are currently in a band called the Messthetics. They have a couple of records out. That outfit is rounded out by a guitar player by the name of Anthong Pirog, and his playing is absolutely amazing. For lack of a better word, the Messthetics can be classified broadly in the world of jazz, I suppose. It's all instrumental. It's nothing like Fugazi, but to me, it's every bit as compelling. I think they're amazing. Anyway, we talk about all the stuff and a whole lot more. So with that, let's just get over to the conversation. Here it is, my conversation with Joe Lally. Hello, Joe. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
How are you, Dan?
I'm okay.
Good.
I am delighted to have you here. I'm a huge Fugazi fan going back from the very beginning. I'm also a pretty huge Messthetics fan as well. So I kind of want to talk about all of it.
Okay.
You have been doing music now for, I guess, close to 40 years, I believe. Was Fugazi your first band? So I looked it up online, and that was the first band that I saw, at least that recorded.
Yeah, there's not much evidence of like the two bands I was in prior to that.
Uh-huh.
Two bands that actually at least played two shows.
Okay.
Any other project that I tried to get started with somebody didn't even like result in a show. So much less songwriting. So I was out there trying, but nothing was coming together. So I just did two, I guess you would just call them punk bands with a friend from high school that I met in an art class who was a year younger than me. And after he went away to school in New York, he had come home on a break and was like, we should start a band, and I'm going to sing. And I was like, okay, I'll play bass. Like, that was
Were you not even playing music prior to that?
not really. No, I
Okay.
think I was trying to sing in just some guys from the neighborhood. There were some musicians in my neighborhood that were friends of mine. And so we were trying to do something and that never got anywhere. And then the band with Peter Kortner, I went out and bought a bass, and an amp and a cabinet, brought it over to his mother's house and like put it in his basement. And we're like, okay, we start writing songs. Like,
We're a band.
neither of us knew anything about
Sure.
anything. And
That's
we're
okay.
just totally determined. And to me, I mean, that's one way to learn how to make music and what being in a band is, because we wrote songs. I got a guitar player I knew from school, an even earlier school, and I just remembered he played guitar and nice guy. So I was like, that's a pleasant person to be around. Let's ask him in. And he
Uh-huh.
played guitar, and we found a drummer through Peter, and, you know, just the things that happen in a band, and we managed to play like a house party.
Right.
And the first show was an art opening for the drummer's mother in a hair salon.
Nice. I love it.
And if that isn't punk, I don't know what is.
Yeah, playing in a hair salon. So how did you then initially hook up with Brendan and Ian and Guy?
All those guys are in bands that I'm going to see, but almost alone. I'm going from my neighborhood. I can't drag any of my friends to like go to shows. So there's just years where I'm going down mostly alone. And I'm seeing the same people at shows. I'm seeing different people in bands, like switch bands, like this band
Sure.
breaks up and then they're in another band. These people are in a band together now and that kind of thing. And so there's a local band called The Obsessed that I'm going to see regularly because I went to high school with the drummer. And through that band, someone in the audience, a guy named Fred Smith, is a guitar player and gets into a band a number of years later. So, like 4 years after we had met seeing The Obsessed, Fred's in a band and we meet at some show and he's like, I'm in a band now. Come see Beefeater.
Oh, nice.
So then I'm going to see his band Beefeater. And then one day they're looking for a roadie to go on a tour. They've booked a tour in the summer of 1986. And I have this job that pays well, all the benefits, really good future, but I can't stand it and I don't care about it. And I'm taking drugs too often. So
hmm
I'm just like, please take me with you. And they did. They didn't really know me that well. And it was really cool that they took me, but it really changed my life. I, stopped taking drugs and
Yeah.
found something I really liked to do and just loved living in a van and traveling around. So after that, I was like, I came home and I was a dishwasher. About a week after being home, Ian asked me to play with him because the singer of Beefeater lived with Ian, and I came home from that tour and I spent the night at their house, which was Discord House,
hmm
where the label was run from. And Ian took us out to lunch the next day. We talked all about the tour. And I think that's when he decided, like, I was pretty serious about, music and being in a band. And he never saw me play bass, but he asked me if I wanted to play bass.
That's wild to me that he'd never seen you play bass because, and I say that because the bass lines in Fugazi is such a critical anchor to all of that music. I mean, rhythmically, the rhythm section of you and Brennan seems so essential. And, the fact that I'm a bass player too, that's probably a big part of why I keyed in on it so much as like, wow, listen to that rhythm section, listen to how just what an anchor it is and how cool those bass lines are.
Yeah, I was very fortunate that the way that the way I sort of conceptualized music and the role of the bass in music, it just kind of somehow jibed with the way Ian had see things. It just made sense when we started to play together. I never thought about playing with Ian at all.
Right.
And I hadn't played bass too much. And especially right then, I'd spent, 2 months on tour with those guys, and they let me get up and sing a song. So Ian actually saw me sing a Bad Brain song with Beefeater when they had finished the tour and got back home. And
Right.
but yeah, the singer of the band, Tomas, had kind of written to Ian like, Joe plays bass. I mean, he didn't see me play bass either, but it was like, I don't know, it was a storyline that started or something, and Ian was
Uh-huh.
just like,
Uh-huh.
"Let's try this guy." If he didn't care for my bass player, it didn't work. You know, what does
Yeah,
he have to
right.
lose?
I
So
suppose. Yeah. So what was the writing process? Like as a band, how did Fugazi write music? Was it a very collective process?
it
Did
it
it
eventually was massively a collective effort of all four of us.
hmm
It started out with ideas of Ian's that I was adding to, and some of his ideas were complete because he had been trying to get things going with a couple of bands that weren't working. Nothing was coming together, and he had a couple of more than a few ideas just kind of laying
hmm
around, either riffs or more formed ideas. Like Waiting Room was pretty much a song when we met. He just didn't have anyone who would play it. And I was like,
Interesting.
that's a perfectly good song, and
It's such a propulsive song. I mean,
yeah,
that's
so
like
I was like, "Okay," and then other things, he would play me stuff, and I would respond with a bass line, I mean, Fugazi has that anomaly of kind of being two bands in a way. We started out as the three-piece that did a bunch of writing, put out two EPs.
Mm-hmm.
Guy enters the band after a bunch of the writing happens, and then on stage with us, and then on the road with us, but as a singer. We did a tour of the United States, which could have been more than one outing, and then we did an entire tour of Europe before Guy picked up the guitar. So we came back from a tour in 89 or 88 after recording Margin Walker, and then we would have started writing with Guy on guitar,
Okay.
and then going like, whatever it took. So sometime in 89, I guess we're writing Repeater. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's Guy, not Guy.
Guy,
Okay. What's the origination of that?
French pronunciation,
Okay. Okay.
I believe. There's French speaking in his family.
Right. Okay. Cool. And then Fugazi went for how many years? Quite a few years. I mean, you started what, 80, 87? Is that right? When you,
87 to 2002. It's about
wow,
15 years.
that's an amazing run for any band, really.
It is. We're pretty determined people, We really, really were psycho about bands we were into and being in a band and making the band work and very tight as like a thinking unit, So no one ever could get into that or affect it. No
Right.
producer, manager, so forth, record label or anything. It was the four of us, and that's why it was so easy not to respond to a major label, only reacting to knowing that we sold records.
Hmm.
It was easy not to sign with them because it was like we don't want to answer to anybody,
Yeah.
you know.
And I suppose being on Discord, that's kind of part of being the same family. So, right.
Right, it was like self-contained, so why ruin a good thing?
So what does that feel like, or in your mind, like when you look back at those 15 years, which is a remarkable one for a band, but also I think being in a band that was so, for lack of a better word, I guess, influential. I mean, sometimes I guess when you're in a band, you don't have a good sense of how other people are responding. But from where I was, there were certain bands along the way that were just like out of the blue and suddenly felt like one of the most important bands that you knew. And Fugazi was one of those bands, not just for me, but for the scene I was in Seattle, and I think really around the country. There was such an incredibly deep reverence for what you stood for philosophically, but also just musically. It was so powerful. There was such an intensity about it that I think people responded to.
That's cool. That's always good to hear. When you're in the middle of it, you can kind of feel, well, you know why you're doing it. You feel it from the audience. But at the same time, we got sort of pigeonholed by people and we were in our own world because we wanted to do cheap shows. And you're not
Hmm.
going to play with a lot of other bands if you're just going to put on, $5 shows.
Right.
I mean, you're not going to play with a lot of your contemporary bands that are out selling the same amount of records or not, and playing the same venues.
Hmm.
We're not really playing with any of those bands. There's a couple of instances where we opened for somebody, and that was it. So that's in 15 years of working over 1,000 shows. That's a lot of shows where it's really just our world. You know what I mean? And that's really strange after a while. So you felt like we're doing this, and then there's the rest of what's going on, and it's a bit odd.
What was the pigeonhole?
Well, it's kind of like, they don't do this and they don't do that and they don't let you dance so after a while you started feeling like, God, we're the biggest fucking like nerds or some, geeks. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of hard not to feel like that. But at the same time, we're doing things the way we want to do them.
Yeah.
We're fulfilling the things we, think are important, and we just keep doing them, so why not?
Mhm.
So it worked.
I remember hearing some people criticizing that they felt like Ian or the band was kind of preachy and self-righteous, and I never felt that way. I was like, yeah, but they're kind of preaching about things that are really important in terms of awareness and talking to other people about how they might want to think about conducting themselves in the world, and in terms of sort of respect and self-awareness and consciousness. And so I never agreed with that criticism. I think some people just like, I just want to rock and leave me alone and don't tell me how to live my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I saw Minor Threat, and in those years I was seeing Minor Threat, I never felt that way about them. I mean, people spoke that way about them at that time.
Right, right.
And I just felt like they're really good bands saying what they want to say. They're
Sure.
just good at it, and that probably like rubs people the wrong way who aren't as good at it or don't feel like they're achieving anything or so. I don't know what it is that makes people like that, but I just felt like, I mean, I was still taking drugs then. It didn't encourage me to not do them anymore. And I still thought they were a cool band, you know. They just didn't
Yeah.
have that effect on me at that time.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, you know, I'm watching Beefeater and Rites of Spring, and I really just started to think about what I was doing, and it really made me want to make a change in my life because I felt really basically kind of old and physically, you know,
Yeah.
spent, and I think it was time for a change. You know, you don't really know what who's going to communicate to you on what level. It's just what you're bringing to it as a listener too. You know.
Yeah. I guess I've always felt like if you are in a band and you have a degree of popularity and you have ideology about things that you feel passionate about, why would you not use that platform you have and that conduit you have to reach people to sort of convey those ideas that you have?
I think there are times in Fugazi lyrics where those kinds of things are clear, and then other times, you know, they're expressed in all kinds of ways, and I think people enjoy looking at the lyrics and trying to decipher and understand and pull things they want out of them. I mean, I love, you know, Bob Dylan's writing, and I don't understand what the hell is going on sometimes, and yet it's always giving me something to think about, even when I don't fully grasp what on earth possessed him to write this way in a song. I don't even know what we're how did we get here? Like in the world he
Lyrically?
lyrically, he puts
Yeah.
you in a place and it's just as if you've been dropped into a book and you're
Hmm.
just in the book and you're like, what page am I on? Who
Right.
are we? Who are the characters, you know?
He has such a distinct voice in terms of just how he talks.
But it still conveys something to you. And I really believe lyrics and music they just speak on a whole other level as far as getting a message across and
Hmm.
all kinds of things can deliver information. So it's really up to the listeners bringing their attention and how interested they really are in,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
what's going on too.
I don't want to make this whole thing a conversation about Fugazi
It's okay.
as much as they still remain one of my favorite bands of the last however many decades. There's another project you were in a couple years after Fugazi ended, which I don't think was very long running. And I only recently discovered Ataxia.
Yeah.
So I spent some time listening to, I guess you put out what, an LP and two EPs and that was it?
No, that was I guess two LPs,
Two LPs? Okay.
but it was the one session that we recorded. That was very much a project that, say, if it involved people in Washington D.C., we would have played the show that then became two shows, you know, one night after the other, and then no one would have ever known about its existence, you know.
Because it was just so brief?
Yeah, because that's the way projects usually happen that are just for a live show, you know what I mean? And then that's the way that started out. I was living in Los Angeles and just having conversations with John about music more often because we were in the same time zone and
Uh-huh.
I was nearby or whatever. We just talked about music and he said, "Hey, why don't you join me and Josh in a live, you know, performance of some of my solo stuff
Hmm.
and choose 9 songs and play it." And so I've told this story a lot, but basically it just didn't work.
I apologize
Oh,
for
that's
having you
okay.
retell it.
No, I mean, people will recognize it if they've read about it, but
Hmm.
I tried, I never do this. I never learn a whole set of songs to, go play them. So
Right.
I was kind of like put to the test to do that and then remember them, you know, within probably 12 days of this, you know,
Oh,
to
wow.
make it. And so the first practice we have, I try playing the songs and I'm basically wrong about something in every song. And I don't think we even got through them all. And they were also aware that a number of the songs that I chose had keyboards on them. And they were like, we don't want to get another person in to play keyboards.
Hmm.
We just wanted to do this as a trio. So maybe John said, well, why don't we just write music together? Because write things with the Chili Peppers, then we go out and play them. And I don't want to do that again with a solo thing because you're here and we could be writing.
Right.
So he and Josh were putting out like an album a month with what were they called, record collection label, and that was going on for like a year or something. They put out a record every month. So that suddenly came up as we wrote very, pretty quickly. But I said, well, how about if I kind of experiment? I was writing a solo record at that time,
Right.
which I didn't take any of those songs because it was still forming, but I wanted to apply that principle to what we were doing. And I said, what if I write one bass riff per song? And then you guys have to make it sound like things are changing. Because conceptually, I feel like that's what I want to do with my solo music. I didn't always do it with my solo music in the end, but it was like it was a goal. Anyway, they took that as an assignment and said, oh yeah, great. I mean, they just loved the idea, and suddenly we were off. So we just wrote, and within a week we had written 10 songs, and the weekend was coming, and John said, what do you feel about us going in the studio and recording these songs before we play the show? And I was like, if that's what you want to do, cool. And we went into the studio, 2 days, recorded those songs. The next day was the show at the Knitting Factory in LA. And then there was a second show added to that. And then that was the end. You know what I mean? That was everything that happened.
Okay. So every song on there revolves around an idea that was started with bass, correct?
Yeah.
And what I hear listening to that music, and you can correct me if it's totally off base, but listening to that music, I'm like, something about the space, something about the texture of the whole thing reminds me a lot of Jaw Wobble and like the first couple of Public Image records. Like the vocals aren't necessarily there, but like the texture and the feel and the openness and the space of the whole thing reminds me so much of that music and those records.
Well, I don't think I was quite as interesting as him on the Ataxia stuff, but it is essentially following a similar guide because Jaw Wobble's I think he's a teenager when Lydon asks him to play, and he has not been in any kind of a band at that time, but he totally takes up the challenge, not because he wants to be in a big band or anything, but because he's like, oh, I have ideas of what the bass can do. And so when he goes into Public Image, my feeling was always that he's kind of the least experienced member, but he's doing really interesting things. And the other experienced members are just going, hey, that's cool. You go ahead and do that. And so they just let him kind of, maybe other people wrote stuff, but it just feels like he's introducing ideas and then they are coming up with these really cool things that go around it.
Yeah.
And so that's in other words, maybe the concept of the song formation is somewhat similar, but I'm always sticking to just one riff. I'm keeping my riffs really simple, mainly because remember, I didn't know they were going to be recorded. Mainly because I want to remember them all next week at the show.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm going to have to know 10 songs, but really I'm going to have to remember them and shit. And I forgot one on stage for sure. We started a song in the show and I'm over at John's side of the stage going, John, what is my fucking riff? He's like in my ear going, bam, bam,
But it worked. I mean, in both cases, it just feels like the bass is the foundation upon which everyone else gets to play. I personally really dig that. And like creatively, that's sort of a process that speaks to me and feels very familiar. It's just like create a rhythm, create a texture, create a feel, and that's the foundation. And then you can kind of texture things, on top of that, basically.
Yeah, I think the things that happened in the 80s with bands putting all kinds of music together to form what that music could be, people who weren't, professional musicians who had done a lot, just very creative people starting bands, with the inspiration to do so, mixed with the clash of all these different types of music. Like everyone heard dub, in the 80s, everyone heard reggae and dub. If you're at punk shows because it just got pulled in, not just in England, but like there were the very first like radio shows in my area were a university station before they closed that was playing interesting punk stuff. They were also playing cool reggae and dub, and then an even more popular station had, a regular radio station locally had a late night show that played dub, and it was just so cool to be introduced to all that stuff at that time. I think a lot of people who got into music then and who wanted to play could bring that into their bass playing. It's as if all of that was suddenly super introduced as a possibility for bass.
If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. So, okay, a little bit after that, you did your first solo record, and you've done what, 2? Is that correct?
Did 3 solo
Oh, 3.
records.
Okay. I missed one, I guess. And then you did Koreki as well with Ian.
Yeah, so the 3 solo records started around 2006 or so,
Okay.
and then I was living in Italy in 2007. I got the second one out before I left, literally just before I left. I think it came out after I left, but I got it recorded before we moved, and then I was living in Italy when it was released in the States, like by Discord, because I'd done it before we left. And then
Right.
the third one was done in Italy
Okay, got it.
with some people I started playing with there. And then coming back from Italy in 2015, I started to play with Ian and Amy and Koreki, and then Brendan and Anthony in the Messthetics in probably 2016.
Okay.
Ian and Amy maybe 2015, and the Messthetics 2016.
So the Messthetics came about after you returned back to the States. I'm kind of fascinated by Fugazi and the Messthetics. I don't know if this is the right way of thinking about it, but as bookends in your musical life. And to me, they feel like they come from utterly and completely different places in terms of like DNA, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because in both cases, it's you and Brendan as the rhythm section, but approaching what you're doing to my ear from an incredibly different place, and I'm sure to a large degree that's due to Anthony. And do I pronounce his name Pirog or Piroj?
Pirog.
Pirog. Okay.
But it really is for pierogi, the dish.
Okay. Well, he's an astounding guitar player,
He
and
is, yeah.
And I was one of these weird kids in high school, and I think you and I are approximately the same age. I was listening to a lot of very uncool music in high school, at least for people in my peer group. I was listening to a lot of prog, and I was listening to a lot of fusion, and I was listening to a lot of very classic jazz from the 60s and into the 70s, so mostly 60s. I don't like chords, prog or fusion. To me, it's just variations of cerebral music as opposed to, a very different kind of coming from a very different place from, say, punk rock. I discovered punk rock much later, and it certainly impacted me in a huge way. But I've always had this deep fondness for types of music that I think is reflected in what you're doing with the Messthetics. So I'm curious what the writing process is between you and Anthony and Brendan, and I guess now more recently with James Brandon Lewis. I don't know if that's going to be an ongoing thing or if that's just a. So let's just talk about, I guess, the whole process of how you guys write together. If it's similar to what you did with Ataxia.
Not necessarily. I mean, as soon as you're with a different group of people, something's going to change.
Of course.
And certainly knowing Brendan, there isn't anything else we can do except pick up where we left off. I mean, it's like knowing someone that well. I don't even know what we do. I don't know that either of us think too much about what we do.
Okay.
We can do it just by listening, and there's so many things that we don't talk about, and we just seem to be able to slip into one thing or another. But the big change was that while I was still in Italy, I kind of ran out of like being happy with lyrics in my solo
Mhm.
music. So I started to construct an idea about instrumental music. And with, no surprise, I would write one bass line and I would just like sort of have that on a track, sort of
Mhm.
to death, and maybe have a second part. But then I invited people over to play guitar on it, or I went to one recording, like a club where I could record with a friend who played guitar. And I also had another friend sending me drum tracks. So I was able to kind of construct without really leaving, my apartment most of the time, this instrumental music. In the end, I thought all of this sounds really cool, except my role in it, I'm not satisfied with. I'm like, what is this?
Mhm.
Because the bass just didn't seem right. And I probably should have just put up the music and then played bass to the whole thing and see if I came up with new bass lines. But anyway, I never got too much farther with it, but I came back to America with all this stuff recorded. And I played that for Brendan. And he just thought of Anthony, who I didn't know because Brendan had been seeing him like the 8 years while I was away. Brendan had seen Anthony on and off during some of that time, and just he's seen him play so many different kinds of music, and he's such a good guitar player. He was like, man, Anthony should be the guy to play with us in this. And we got together and it just started. So, to just skip some of the unnecessary part of the story,
Mhm.
we just start to write together. But we started out writing. Anthony was asking us to write a solo record with him. There was a label
Okay.
that might put out a solo record of his. So he came to us with some ideas. And then we kind of formulated some of our own ideas. And then the second record, I had even brought in some of my ideas that I had from Italy, and they
Mhm.
got transformed into this band. They kind of got built upon those ideas. So it kind of comes from different places. Meanwhile, Brendan could write something.
Mhm.
So that, from the first record, there could be an idea that Brendan brought in, you know, to how something works. So they grew from all three of us writing, I guess, but there was a lot of Anthony's input on the first. A little more from Brendan on the second.
Mhm.
Brendan might compose something on piano, and then he would have chords that he would play us, and we would talk about and kind of arrange into what the band would do with it. And so it kind of comes from all over. And then the first record with James, we started to write at the end of COVID. I think our first show with him was before COVID,
Mhm.
where he got up and just joined us on a song. Like, this guy can join us on saxophone. So we just played our set as usual. It's just that we had a song or two someone played saxophone on. When that's all you see of someone, it's hard to go like, what happened? It sounded good. That was it.
Seemed
you
cool.
know. So that that happened a couple more times.
Is he DC based?
No, he was in Brooklyn, so this was only
Okay.
happening when we passed through the New York City area.
And how did you connect with him?
Anthony knew James and had played in projects of James, but had met James at a William Hooker session. I believe he's
Okay.
a drummer. Invited all these people to play on a record. Everyone plays for the session, and parts except Anthony and James are sort of drawn to each other from hearing each other play. And they stay together and talk, actually, and like go have dinner or something. And
Right. But these are more from jazz circles as opposed to like
yeah, totally.
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the thing is that Anthony played in all kinds of stuff.
Uh-huh.
Like when he comes to us, I mean, he had been in a surf band. He played a lot of the Danny Gatton music with like Telecaster players, like in the area, because
Mhm.
Danny Gatton was from here, and his rhythm section would play with other players, and they would get together with a number of guitarists, and they all would play his music. And Brendan saw all these things, but then he would also see an experimental set with Anthony. Anthony plays with his partner Janelle Lapine, who plays cello, and
Mhm.
they would do their music together, which they put out a number of records of. And then there were so many different ways to see him play that. And in the end, it ends up seeming like, well, this whole other jazz world that he plays in New York, because he studied up there too and got involved in some of those same people that are in like the Zorn scene
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
other parts of the New York jazz scene. He was just playing on and off with people. And so he knew what was going on up there because he's playing at shows then up there too. But Yeah, it just is like there's too much to try to cover. I mean, that guy just knows
Yeah.
too much. But
And
anyway,
he seems to be incredibly prolific from what I can tell.
absolutely.
I had never heard of his name prior to the Messthetics.
Mhm.
And then I kind of dug into the catalog. He has a whole bunch of stuff that goes back, like
Yeah.
many, many years. And it seems too that he is continuing to be pretty prolific, very much outside of Messthetics.
Yes.
I noticed there was like a big gap between, I'm going to say it wrong, anthropocosmic nest.
Anthropocosmic nest.
Yes, of course. It's easy. And then the James Brandon Lewis collaboration, there was like 5 years. Is that
Pretty much due to COVID.
okay?
Um, we lost our rehearsal space, which was
Hmm.
Brendan's studio space, where we recorded the first two records. I mean, we really got shut down by COVID. Anthony moved away for a year because we just didn't do anything for a year.
Hmm.
And so all of that restarted. Then we were joined by James when we started to play again a couple of times. And then one of them was the evening before James had invited us. He said, if you're going to come up, and we were doing a show at Union Pool, he said, if you're coming up, just come up the evening earlier and do a song with me for my next record.
Cool.
And after that happened, the song Fear Not on Eye of Eye, it was like, how can we not include him in this? There's a whole other thing is happening now. Just
Yeah.
things start to really accelerate with him. So like all that music we were writing, and even other old music that I hadn't thought about in a while. Again, some of the tracks from Italy, I just was like, oh, that makes sense to do now that it just opened up another door. So all that music got written, and he came down and practiced one day, and the next day we went in the studio, and
Wow.
2 days later, we were playing that music at a show. The record was done. It was insane. It just got recorded. It was done. So that was the first record, and frankly, we just recorded the second record after a tour this July, and it kind of worked the same way.
The same
We
way.
just
It's just
Yeah, we went in late the first day in the evening, and, so we didn't spend that long, and then 2 more days, and that was like, "Oh, that looks like that record's done." So
wow.
that
That's
we have the
amazing.
second record.
You have that what I refer to as telepathy, because that's what happens between people musically often in bands is you develop some form of telepathy.
Yeah, we thought we'd go in and demo what we had because we couldn't quite see what the group of songs was gonna be,
Hmm.
but we had different ideas, and we knew July was gonna be a lot of bopping around Europe and having the opportunity to rehearse some of it at sound checks. Any finished songs, we could always play whatever we felt most confident with. That was just a couple. Some had been played for a long time. At
Hmm.
that point, they were just waiting to be recorded. So we just came back and decided while we're sort of hot from the tour, James was coming down to play a show in DC like 4 or 5 days after the tour. So we went into the studio that evening after that show. That was an afternoon show. And yeah, it just kind of worked because we were like, oh, those are the songs. We don't have to demo anything.
Right.
It's
It's
done.
it's done.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
I don't know what there is in the future because James, I mean, he doesn't need to play with Brendan and I. There's these players that Jesus, the guys, we did a tour with the Messthetics and James Brandon Lewis trios, and his drummer Chad Taylor on half of that tour was amazing.
Hmm.
He's an unbelievable drummer, man. It was so cool to see him play every night. And then he had another guy, and please forgive me. I want to say his name was Andy, and I'm probably wrong. On the West Coast, I feel terrible, but I saw him for that one tour. I never saw him again.
Okay.
Was also a great drummer, and just all the people that James comes into contact with, it's like he's always putting out at least a couple of records a year. This is James's way of just existing. It's kind of Anthony's too. If you look at what he's doing,
Yeah.
he's still putting out a couple of records no matter what we do. And so I've become, instead of sitting around waiting to see what the Messthetics are going to do, I've just started to think about all of that more. And I'm just like, well, now or never. So I'm just getting way more involved in trying to make other things go. So I'm just pushing at things. And I have a couple of other projects. So we'll see. Some of them may be just live projects. I don't know.
Yeah. So things that are not Messthetics,
Right.
essentially. Right. Is this next record going to also be on Impulse?
Yeah, the three of us are signed to a 3 record thing, but it's up to the label, and they did ask
Okay.
us for the second one. And so now we just handed in the second one in October.
What is that experience like being on, a storied historic jazz label as opposed to Discord? I mean, I'm sure it's all good, but it must be different.
It is very different. The illusion of being on Impulse
Hmm.
it's a beautiful illusion. I get to see
Yeah.
my name on that same label with those particular colors and the way
Uh-huh.
things look, like I look at an Alice Coltrane record, which are
Yeah.
some of the deepest, connected records that I have feeling for Pharoah Sanders and John Coltrane and
Yeah.
Alice
J-
Coltrane. All that stuff means so much to me.
Journey to Satchidananda.
Yeah, but
Wow.
that's
What a
all
record.
amazing, and at the same time, they never sent us a statement. So, yeah, I'll say that in an interview.
Okay.
I don't mind. Maybe it'll encourage them to mail me a statement. "Hey, you
Maybe.
sold 16 records, just fucking tell us."
Yeah.
But we know
T-
we've
Tell us we're
sold
underwater. That's okay.
we know we've sold a number. I mean, even if they're all hand sold by us and all bought
Hmm.
by us to hand
Hmm.
sell them, it's
Hmm.
like, just send us the statement. I am tempted to send them a Discord statement and go, "Look, 8 people work here. Look at the detail in these statements," you know?
Right.
And, I haven't done that, but I don't feel like there's any necessity to just be a smartass for no reason, so,
Sure, but you are the artist, and I think,
yeah.
I mean, I think of like Verve, I think of Blue Note, and I think of Impulse, and I just kind of bow down. Like, to be able to say, yeah, I'm on Impulse is pretty cool, even if they don't send you statements. And hopefully they will. Hopefully they will.
Yeah, it's really otherwise, it is kind of the things the people we are in contact with are certainly nice people. No, we don't have anyone, barking at us or being rude. Everyone is nice, but the function as a label, frankly, Discord is better, Sorry.
So, is the record going to be the same, like James Brandon Lewis with the Messthetics? Like,
Yeah, because really, like I was saying, it's like he's kind of a guest on our record. So that's the way it is. And Anthony, continues to write like melodies and things. And
hmm
James wrote a song for the first record, but really the rest of the record is us laying out songs that James is entering into and going like, participating in. It's not
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's not like he doesn't add things. I'm just saying that's how they come about.
Do you imagine, as for as long as the Messthetics continue to create music, that he will be part of it, or not necessarily?
I think I mean I can see with an artist like James that he could easily drift away.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think it's also we also just kind of became friends enough that I think, as opportunities arise now and then with anyone asking for us, even if this last record is, we're not able to concentrate on writing and making records, anything that would come up, I could see him just going like, yeah, I can do that show. I mean, it's just a matter of like
Right.
over time asking. I think audiences and promoters, I think they're not going to forget. I mean, we get a really good reaction. I'm not saying that a lot of people come out no matter where we play. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we even have a big following. I'm just saying that the people who do see us play, even if we're opening for a band who knows nothing about us, they really respond to us. And it's a wonderful thing.
Well, if you come to San Diego, I'll be there.
I know that for an instrumental band, it's not an easy task
Yeah. Yeah.
to like gather an audience, and gather a following. And even though people know who Brendan and I are, there's nothing guaranteed about what's happening. The Messthetics have played a lot already, and people have kind of come out and gone like, well, what are these guys doing now? And at the end of it, they'd say like, I didn't know what to think, but I liked that. But it
Right.
doesn't mean they come back.
I have a hard time imagining your, quote unquote average Fugazi fan kind of going, I'm every bit as devoted to the Messthetics as I am for Fugazi. And that's not intended at all as sort of, any sort of slight.
Yeah.
I just think it goes back to what I was saying, that it seems to be coming from such a completely different kind of DNA. You
Yeah.
know, Even though the Messthetics are doing stuff that kind of hits on different places, it is still instrumental, and I think for the most part is coming from a place that is primarily jazz. For me, I love that. I mean, I think it's phenomenal.
It's funny because, I mean, to try to think about it in genres, it is also, well, it's difficult, but
Hmm.
at the same time, when we do talk about that kind of music, or you might say where we see Anthony and James coming from. I mean,
Yeah.
Brendan and I, we didn't really need to sign to Impulse. We didn't really need to do such a thing. We looked at it and went like, "Oh, this is that thing that we always said was not necessarily a good idea." And then we
Right.
did it. And for reasons that weren't really Impulse's problem, I don't want to go into it all, but it wasn't really Impulse. It really was problematic. We had to wait a year for the record to come out.
Oh, wow.
That's ridiculous, but that had to do with sort of contracts of James and someone just taking it out on us. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
like, I'll just leave it at that, but it was just totally foolish, like, and it was just the kind of thing that made us go, "Oh, that's why we
Right.
never did this," you
Right.
know?
Well,
So,
indie versus major, right?
but then when we do go to write that music, I can say that knowing the elements that come from that genre, that specific genre, soloing, that when you see those types of people at that level, at like the caliber of player that both
Yeah.
Anthony and James are, writing almost has become more simple because you can just see that we just need to set up like these things that can happen.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden the song writes itself.
And they just happen.
It's just a matter of putting like sort of these blocks of ideas together. Do these few things, do these inspire the thing, the soloing to happen? And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden the rest of the song just falls into place. It's truly a different thing than I'm used to. And it's been a
Right.
really fun experience to do that.
I would imagine. I mean, it's just hearing it from you sounds very
Mhm.
kind of satisfying, and I'm not even part of the experience.
It is.
But
Right.
it's cool. Well, let me wrap this up with a final question. How do you live your life in such a way so that your creative output is always essential to your day-to-day existence moving forward? Like, how do you approach it? How do you think about it?
Well, I do, one thing I have going for me is that I wake up early. It's always been very automatic for me. So even since Fugazi, going on tour means trying to turn my clock around because every night you go to bed later than you normally do.
Yeah.
And I just keep waking up at the same time, like in the morning, no matter how late we go to sleep on tour. So the first week is usually me collapsing from exhaustion to fit into the new cycle. That's hard, but the rest of the time at home, it's actually kind of useful. So these days, I do try to make my like different ideas about what I want to work on or just practicing something happen early in the morning before my lessons begin or something like
Hmm.
that I
Hmm.
give online. So that's cool, and I'm trying to do after it's about the same time I've been playing music, so about 45 years ago or whatever, 40 years ago, I would draw or I would make art all the time, visual art. So I really want to get back to doing that. All of this it requires discipline to do when you're not um when you're just home to do it. So it's like to make it happen, you've got to like chip away at it. It's got to be a part of every day. So I try to include something in there. And I have these different projects now. I finally played with a saxophone and drummer local that I'm hoping to do intermittent shows with, that I see. Why can't I just book that through it? Because we don't need to do a lot of rehearsing for it. It's I can come up with my ideas for it and I sort of drive that band to happen and it's kind of cool to be very loose about it. And then there's a project I'm working on with a viola player from Queens, Jessica Pavone, and cello player from Chicago, Allison Chesley, who plays as Helen Money. We just spent last weekend writing together for a couple of days, and that was our first attempt at this project. I've been trying to do. It's probably been a couple of years. I've been playing with different people, trying to figure out what I'm thinking, and I finally started to get at that. But it means going through like the different bits of things I'm aiming at, and trying to solidify them. It means work at it, uh,
Right.
despite not knowing what the end product is going to be. You just have to keep making a mark with it, taking a stab at it.
And it sounds like you have a very clear discipline about where you're going and how to incorporate that into
Never
your
feels
routine.
like
No?
it. Never feels like enough. Always feels like, hey man, get back in line.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com. And our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.